Welcome to the Charlevoix Stories Project, a continuation of the Charlevoix oral tradition. Today is March 9, 2016, and we are at the Charlevoix Public Library. My name is David Miles, and our videographer today is Rick Pierpont of Pierpont Productions in Harbor Springs, Michigan. Today we'll be talking to Bill Trabiliwicz, who used to work at the Big Rock Nuclear Point in Charlevoix, Michigan, almost from its inception up to the time it closed in 2006. Bill, can you give us a little bit of your background about where you're from and how you ended up in Charlevoix?
I sure can. Well, let's see. I grew up in the Metro Detroit area in the city of Dearborn, actually, and went through the Dearborn schools, went to college in the Detroit area at the Lawrence Institute of Technology, thinking I wanted to be an automotive engineer. By the time I got out of school, I decided that I didn't really want to do that anymore and was looking for another line of work. It was also the year of the oil embargo, the first oil embargo, so there were no jobs for automotive engineers anyway. So I moved up to my parents' cottage on Black Lake. The first year I was there, I had a ski pass and a dog and just kind of hung out.
Now, where's Black Lake located?
Black Lake is located over by Sheboygan, between Sheboygan and Onaway. And then one day there was an ad in the Petoskey News Review looking for auxiliary operators at the nuclear plant. So I applied and won the job over, I think they said there was 50 finalists that they tested, and I got one of the jobs, and my friend Gene Drenth got the other one. And so I started work there in 1976.
So at the time you didn't have to have a nuclear background for that particular job?
No, they were taking a lot of the operators came out of the Navy. The fact that I had a mechanical engineering degree was almost a detriment because the plant manager said, "Wait a minute, you're overqualified to be an operator. You know, you ought to be an engineer."
Now, what does the word operator mean?
We were the operators that actually operated the equipment out in the plant. I started as an auxiliary operator, which was, we had control room operators who worked in the control room and were licensed with the NRC. The auxiliary operators were unlicensed, but we were the eyes, the arms, and the legs, and the strong backs out in the plant. So we operated all the equipment that was out in the plant. If they
did this involve putting the fuel into and out of the reactor?
That was really a control room operator's job. Once the fuel got into the fuel pool, then it became we called them AOs, the AO job to maneuver the fuel around in the pool.
Okay. How many years were you at Big Rock?
I was there for almost exactly 30 years. I think it was 29.9 years I worked there.
And your position when the plant closed?
When the plant closed, I was the outage manager, is what I had evolved to. I'd gone through a whole series of, first I was auxiliary operator, then I became a shift supervisor. I was a shift engineer for a little while, then I became the outage manager when Russ Abel retired, and worked that for a number of years until we decided that it was time to get out of the operations line, because what happens is if you're the ops manager, you're on call all the time. Doesn't matter. So I was on call for like 10 years straight. So I got out of that and they said, "Oh, you don't want to be the ops manager anymore? Well, you can be the outage manager," which is like, because they said, all you do is complain about the way we run our outages, so you fix it. so that's what I started doing that in about 95. And then when they decided to shut the plant down in 97, they said, "Well, I guess you're going to run the biggest outage we've ever had." So I stayed on as we had a different term for it in decommissioning. It was, I don't know, project and scheduling manager or something like that.
I see.
But yeah, so.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many people the plant employed at its peak?
At its peak during operation?
Yes.
We had, the day we shut down, we had about 175 people on the staff of the plant. Now, when we went into decommissioning and we had to bring in extra help to plan the big job and get going on the engineering for all that. We actually peaked at about almost 500 people.
Really?
Yeah, created quite a problem for us because our facilities at 175 people were pretty good, but all of a sudden you want to triple the size of that, and so we were moving in trailers, and we had a whole trailer farm and everything we put up.
That I well remember when I came out there.
And we ended up moving. We rented rooms at the Sleep Inn. We moved our training department down there. We took over the old Lexolite building there on the north side and moved our storeroom stuff there because we were just bursting at the seams.
I see. Well, let's go back to the beginning. What was the reason that consumers decided to locate at this particular point in Michigan?
Well, this is kind of like urban legend, but the urban legend was, being that it was such an early plant, they didn't want to build the plant in a highly populated area in case there was any issues. This goes, you think about Indian Point being on Long Island, you don't want to build your first nuke plants on Long Island. So it was kind of an isolated area. Somehow they managed to get their hands on the property. You needed to have a water source right next to the plant for cooling. And so somehow the property ended up in consumers' hands. Other than that, I'm not exactly sure. I think we bought the property from Ed Shanahan.
That's right.
And so he had all that lake frontage. And
it was a top secret affair.
And it was a top secret affair.
And he didn't even know what the land was destined for until after he sold it.
Right. So.
Okay, the plant was originally planned as a research and development facility for its first few years. That was the intent, to educate the nuclear industry. Did it continue in that capacity beyond the first few years?
Not really. We were an R&D project for about the first 3 years, and we had a number of technologies that we instituted to prove that some of the systems would work that went on when they built the bigger plants. Probably the one that always comes to my mind is we had a couple of they were butterfly valves, big butterfly valves in the main coolant lines, and it was to prove the technology that by varying flow through the reactor that you could vary the power level without causing any problems. They were worried about things like chugging is what we called it, slugs of steam going up through the reactor and causing power spikes to go, but we proved that technology worked, and it went on to when they built the bigger plants, they installed variable flow plants or pumps, and proved that it would work. So.
Well, since it was only the fifth in the country and the first in Michigan to be built, what essentially did Big Rock contribute to the design and development of future American plants?
Well, there was the one I just talked about, the variable flow. We were one of the first high density reactors, and so we proved that the fuel density, our core density, would work without causing any power fluctuations. We did a lot of work with fuel design. Early fuel design had some issues with cladding failures, and we were able to work with the fuel manufacturers to get the fuel design that would be stable for an entire core run. Those are the ones I can think of right now.
Now, Big Rock set a world record for longevity of a plant.
Yep.
15 other American plants came and went in its lifetime. So what do you think contributed to that amazing operational span?
Well, I think it goes, I was lucky enough to work with some of the original crew, the guys that were there that ran these R&D projects, and were so proud of the fact that they were on the cutting edge of the atomic revolution, if you want to call it. And it went the same for the people that built the plant. They were proud of the fact that, these Boilermakers, I still run into people around town that are retired and say, I was there and I built that plant, and I'm proud of the fact that I built it. So it was built absolutely to the highest possible standards and care that anybody could use to build the plant. And then the operators were proud of the fact that, you know, that they were operating one of the first nuclear power plants in the country.
Right.
You know, and these guys came from they were steam plant operators in the consumer system. They came out of one of the old guys, Warren Wheat. You know, he always talked about working at the Wealthy Street Steam Plant in Grand Rapids, and that was a consumer's plant. And then he got pulled in to operate this thing. So everybody was proud of it. They really cared about what they did and didn't take anything for granted. You know, we had checks and balances that are just amazing, you know, the way we ran it. And so it was really neat that I was able to work with those guys and get that same esprit de corps, if you want to use it, to learn to operate the plant that way.
Well, one of the records I think it set was not only for longevity, but it went almost a year.
343 days.
343 days.
Continuous operation.
Without shutting down 24/7.
Yep. When I started during that run, so it was very interesting because they had already started the plant up, and then I came in and I'm an operator, and so then we continue to run and run and run and run, and you get to the point where when things are running well, that's the beauty of a nuke plant. When they're online, man, they'll just run until, you know, you essentially run out of fuel, basically. And so I was on site for quite a while because I started in November and it was August when we shut down, August of '77. And there were some areas of the plant that I'd never been in because you couldn't go in there when the plant's online. So it was very interesting. But we just kept track of it. The funniest story about that is Russ Abel was our ops manager at the time. And when we started really cooking on the days, you know, like we got over 300, we put up a little calendar, tear-off calendar in the control room, and we had numbered the days. And so every day we'd go, okay, here's 302, 303, and he just hated that. He thought it was giving us tremendous bad luck, you know, and we were going to trip the plant, you know, and all that kind of stuff, you know. Because the reality is there were 5 million moving parts in that plant, you know, and so you think about what could go wrong. You know, we had a run a few years later where we were at, I think we ran 339 days, and it was the classic $6 ball bearing that brought the plant down, you know, before we could break the record, you know, so.
Well, another amazing thing about the plant was its safety record.
Yep.
Now, safety, I know, was always a top priority out at the plant.
Yep.
And I don't know how many years the plant went without a major injury, until during the winter, a fellow was coming down some stairs and he slipped on some ice and broke his ankle.
Yep, it was Larry Monshore. He was actually one of our safety guys. and I think at the time he was actually, I think he was going out of his trailer, because it was when we'd gotten put in all these trailers. He was coming out of his trailer and he was walking to a safety meeting and slipped and broke his ankle.
Right.
Yep, he was the guy at the end. At the front end, it was, I know all these guys. Paul Fedoruk, he broke his ankle going down a flight of stairs inside the plant. And but we just, you know, I mean, we paid attention to it, to safety, to industrial safety. We had safety meetings all the time for all the people. We tried to keep current on safety technology. You know, we had ice creepers for everybody walking around in the winter. We spent time sanding the roads and taking care of things. And if there was a piece of concrete that was broken, you know, or a toe stubber, we would take care of it. But we just constantly stressed it. You know, we always talked about 3 phases of safety. There's nuclear safety, there's radiation safety, and then there's industrial safety. You know, and all 3 of them were equal, and we kept track of them all the way through.
Can you talk a little bit about the economic impact of the plant on Charlevoix and Hayes Township?
As far as Hayes Township, the fact that we paid taxes for our 600 acres of property out there, and the fact that we were running a power plant on the site, I'm sure it was a big contributor as far as just the property taxes. as far as the impact on Charlevoix, you know, well, we had, well, when I started there were only 60 people here, but the fact that, you know, the jobs were pretty well paying, so we had, you know, so we had good incomes. We had, everybody bought houses. The people, the professional people that transferred in and out, if they were to transfer out to a different plant, oftentimes the company would buy their house and put it up on the market for them. And so it was, you know, we were pretty good. You know, there was another urban story is they advertised for janitors one time in the paper, and they put the wage in the paper and got calls from other businesses saying, why are you saying that? Don't say that, you know, that you're paying them that much money, kind of a thing. So, you know, so we all lived here. We all bought houses and cars and raised our kids.
There was a real estate crunch here at one time because all of you came at once.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, or even before that, for construction, and all of a sudden there were no houses left available in Charlevoix.
Yeah, I believe that's true.
Yeah, and then you all got involved in various functions in Charlevoix, politics, athletics. You sort of spread out into the entire community.
Yeah.
And I think when the plant was closing, the remark went around that somebody at Big Rock, or maybe not at Big Rock, said, who's going to coach Little League?
Right.
Because everybody became so involved in the community.
Yep.
At that time. And it were the type of people that we weren't used to because you were very highly educated scientific types. And that brought the, you might say, the class level of Charlevoix up a notch with the influx.
I guess. But yeah, you're absolutely true. You know, we were involved in, I think of, let's see, Cub Scouts. I know we were involved in Cub Scouts. We were all involved in Little League. I was a Little League commissioner for 5 years, you know, and you know, and then we got involved on the school board. You know, we were, and you know, it actually went beyond Charlevoix because I know my one friend Bill Merlin, he was the mayor of East Jordan for a number of years, you know, and stuff like that. So yeah, so we were out there, you know, and we just, I guess everybody felt like we should give back to the community, and so we did. The other corollary is you know, some of these people would say, well, you know, I really didn't like the way that was running, so they say, I guess I just got to get in there and do it myself. You know, kind of a thing. So.
Now, you went through any number of protests out there, one of which even got a statement from Ralph Nader, even though he never came here to actually investigate what was going on.
Yeah, we were proud of the fact that he cared about us.
Did you feel at any time that perhaps any of these protests were justified?
No. Being on the inside and operating the plant, I knew that we were working as safely as possible and making our power just as efficiently as we could. And the other thing I always felt is being an engineer and a practical person, you know, it's not, there's risks to everything. You know, I many times I said, in fact, I said it just the other day, that every once in a while I felt like we should blink the lights just so that everybody knows that it's not magic that electricity comes out of the wall. True. You know, that there's people working. You know, when there's these articles in the paper about, well, the ambulance guys are working on Christmas and the doctors are working on Christmas. Well, I'm telling you, we worked a lot of Christmases out at Big Rock, you know, to keep everybody's Christmas tree lit and keep everything going. So, so did I feel they were justified? I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion. You know, I always said, well, if you don't have us making electricity, how are you going to get it? And I'd said I'd rather live next to a nuclear plant, which I almost did. I was only 2 miles away, than live next to a coal plant any day. You know, so if you want to have electricity, you're going to have some risk.
Good point.
We had the one interesting story about that is one time we had Greenpeace protesting, and they said, oh, we're going to bring these boats on, we're going to land on shore, and so we were kind of locked down for watching for the Greenpeace boats. Well, luckily it was a day when the lake was just boiling, so I'm not even sure they ever left the pier head to come around, but they never came. But then later on that night, I was invited to dinner at a friend of mine's house, and so I ended up. It was a Saturday, and I ended up working a long day because we were ready for the attack, you know. And so I go to dinner, and his brother was there, and his wife happened to be a Greenpeace member, and so she happened to mention that during the dinner, so it got a little quiet after a while.
Now, Big Rock attracted nuclear scientists. They came from all over the globe to study what had been done out there, how it was built, how it operated.
Yep.
What were some of your memorable moments with these men and women that came?
Well, probably the saddest moment was we had a group come from a plant in Russia. And it was way up in the Soviet Far East in a town called Bilibino, and I'll talk more about that later because I did go visit that plant. But anyway, they came for a visit. Actually, did we go there first? I think we might have actually gone to their plant first. But anyway, when they were here, and you know, we were showing them our plant, but we were also showing them the area, and we were, I mean, we put them out on one of Sonny's boats. They went out fishing, you know, and everything, but there was a terrible auto accident that actually a couple of them ended up dying because of the accident. So,
that happened near the viaduct near Bayshore, I believe.
Yep, it happened right on the curve before the viaduct.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, you know, they had somehow gotten out of our control. We had interpreters, and there was a young interpreter guy that was from Lansing, and somehow they got out of our control, and they were driving up to Kmart to buy a video camera because the one guy wanted to get a video camera to take video, and they got in this terrible collision and died. So, but yeah, that was the saddest one. But we had, I mean, they came from everywhere. They had.
What year was that?
That was about 94, I think, somewhere right in those early 90s. But they came from all over the world, and it was very interesting sometimes. We had people in from Korea, we had people in from Japan, we had them come in from England.
Bulgaria.
The Bulgarians were here. That was another wild visit with the Bulgarians, because they were here at the time of my friend Pat Donnelly. His daughter was getting married, and so they got invited to the wedding and stuff. And you know, the one thing, I'm not trying to categorize any people any special way, but man, those guys could drink the vodka. and a few times we tried to keep up with them, and that was a mistake because they had a lot more practice at it than we did.
Well, I used to work at the Lodge Motel.
Oh yeah.
And at one time, a family came in from Poland, and the fellow had been to Big Rock. He had been so entranced with Charlevoix that he brought his family back, including his mother, his elderly mother, who didn't speak a word of English. And I think they were impressed with Charlevoix as much as he was, because they stayed for a week.
Oh yeah.
And so I think he was just very proud to have been here, to have made the friends he made, and to bring the family back, to show them Charlevoix and the plant where he had come.
And we had, you know, and beyond just the international visitors, you know, there was industry people who came, and some of them I know essentially moved here, you know, just bought houses and said, I'm going to retire, I'm moving there, because this is a great place. And we've always known it was a great place, and so we kept at it. One little side story is we had started decommissioning, and a delegation came from Japan, and Ken Powers was the site manager at the time. Ken Powers and I hosted these guys, and we'd take them on a tour, and we'd have a power plant presentation and all this kind of stuff. PowerPoint presentation, and what we would do is we'd end up with a little question and answer session in one of our conference rooms. Well, we get all done, and the one guy reaches into his briefcase and he pulls out this bottle of sake in a ceremonial kind of wrapper. And of course, alcohol on a nuclear site is absolutely forbidden. He set that on the counter or on the table, And Ken looked at it, he looked at me, I looked at it, looked at him, and it was, you couldn't have said it if it would have been a bomb and put it on the table. We wouldn't have got a bigger reaction. Ken goes, "Thank you very much." And then he leans over to me and he goes, "Get that out of here right now." So then I picked it up and put it out in my car to get it off site. But we just went, he sent that out there and we go, "Ah!"
So you didn't really insult him by not inviting
No, we
him to
tried
spot?
we did not.
Did you go to anywhere overseas?
Yes,
on
I
behalf
went.
of the
I
industry?
actually visited the Bilibino plant in the Soviet Far East. We went with a delegation of 4 of us. Went and toured their site, and took in some of their sites. And golly, flew us around on helicopters and everything because it was up in the tundra. The plant was actually 300 miles west of the Bering Straits and 120 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And the plant was there because the town, they had discovered gold there in the 50s or something and built this town to mine the gold. But what they were doing is they were burning the peat off the tundra to heat the town, and it was in a valley. And so they said in the wintertime, when it was 50 below zero, there was this smog layer that would be like 4 feet off the ground. And what was happening is the people were all dying like at 45. It was like you were smoking all the time, so they were all dying. So they built this small little nuclear site. It was 4 12-megawatt reactors is what it was, these little tiny reactors, and they were essentially their own grid because there was no grid out there, so they powered the town. They powered the gold mining operation. They provided steam heat for the buildings. It was actually a very interesting setup. They would, when you're on a grid, you just kind of push your power into the grid and it kind of goes out, and you really don't affect the grid. But these guys, every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, they had to ramp up power because the mining operation was coming on. People were making breakfast, so they needed more power, and it was very interesting.
What was the route you had to take to get there?
Well, we flew from here somewhere. We flew to Anchorage, and then from Anchorage we flew to a town on the Kamchatka Peninsula. No, it wasn't. It was just inside a place called Magadan, and then from there we got on a plane. It was like a cargo plane that flew us it was like a 3-hour flight up north to where the site was. It was quite a deal. We're riding on a cargo plane, and there's supplies for the plant and everything. It was a really interesting flight to get there.
Did you run into any kind of bureaucracy that might have questioned why you were there, if you were spies or snooping or anything like that?
Well, the only time we got into any trouble, it was actually a very interesting. It was a great trip, actually. I could tell stories about this for an hour. But when we were up at the plant, we went to the gold mine. They showed us the gold mining operation. And it was basically a sluice operation where they strip away the ground and run it through a sluice and separate the gold. When we went there, they said, "No pictures." And we said, "Okay." Well, then we got in there, and I snuck my camera out and took a couple pictures. And all of a sudden, the security people were over there with us saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, nothing." And so they managed to talk them into letting me keep the pictures we had. But they said, "No more pictures and no pictures of the security people." So we said, "Okay." So that was that. But the one quick story I'll tell you is when we were going to the plant and we got off the plane at Magadan, we were met by a delegation from the utility and the Minatom is the Russian Ministry of Nuclear Power, and so they had us had this little ceremony to meet us. Well, what was happening is we were coming through customs one at a time. So I came through first, and so I walk around the corner and we shake all hands and everything, and the guy goes, "You have to try our local caviar." And so he's got a mason jar, and it's full of salmon eggs, orange salmon eggs. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, well, that's fish bait. You know, and stuff. And he goes, oh no, you got to try it. So I said, okay. So he showed me you take a piece of bread and you put some butter on it. So I put butter on it and I put like 2 of the salmon eggs on there, you know. And the guy goes, "Niet," and he puts like a big tablespoonful of it on there, you know. So now I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, I can eat this and maybe throw up. I said, or I can refuse to eat it and create an international incident here. So as I'm standing there staring at this piece of bread, Larry Darrow was on the trip with me. He comes around the corner and he looks at me and he says, I knew there was something terribly wrong. But then I said, okay, down the hatch. So I shoved the thing in my mouth and managed to keep it down, and it tasted exactly like fish bait would taste. So.
Big Rock was said to be the second largest tourist attraction in Michigan, and over 1 million people came to the visitor center in its 13-year lifetime. Do you regret that center was ever closed, because it told so many people so much about how nuclear power is generated? Absolutely.
It was, we ran into people all the time, just like you said, you know, people who, yeah, I was there when I was 10 years old, or I was there, you know, and really thought it was cool. And people have flashed, they were giving out these little cards that were like ID cards that I was there, or these buttons. You know, people have sent me those buttons, the little ready kilowatt buttons with the nuke plant on it and stuff. And absolutely, because part of the problem in this country was everybody always associated the nuclear power plants with an atom bomb. You know, how many times have you heard people say, "Oh, could that plant blow up? What about that? Could you blow up?" And absolutely not. And it's because of the lack of understanding of the technology in general of the people that couldn't refute what the anti-nuke people were saying about how this is a bomb and this is bad and all that sort of thing. So, do you think the visitor center sparked any people to make a career in the nuclear industry? Oh, absolutely. I know a couple people that went through there and then came to work for us at the plant. Really? Yeah. You know, in the end, or went into the Navy and then came out of the Navy and came to work for us. And I think the reason it was shut down was because I think it was the Public Utility Commission in Michigan said you can't spend your utility money to promote your product. It was I think that's what happened there. Really? That's what I remember. I think just the general reason that was given was for economic reasons. Yeah. Whatever they may have been. But the plant was so popular, it was just so mysterious why they shut it down, the visitor center. Yeah. Which is too bad. It is too bad. Yeah, because we had didn't we give the model to the Historical Society? Yes, it's still in storage. Is it? Good. Oh, yeah. Good. I'm glad you have it, not me. My wife wouldn't like it in my basement. Now, after 3 Mile Island, the whole picture changed because it was demonstrated that a plant could face serious trouble because of mechanical failure. So there were all of these updated guidelines that plants had to retrofit, they had to modernize. And Big Rock was so small, and it was such a small percentage of the consumer's grid. Was that the reason why it was shut down, because it would have cost so much money to bring it up to current standards? Well, I don't think that's exactly true, because there were, coming out of 3 Mile Island, there was a number of task forces that looked at what happened at 3 Mile Island and what changes there had to be made. There were equipment upgrades that had to be built into the plants, and we installed the great majority of those equipment upgrades. There was a lot of changes on the training front for the operators, because the operators made some mistakes in there. They didn't interpret their readings as they should have, and took actions that really made the problem worse. So we went through a major rebuild of our training for operators, And that's when also when they decided that they needed more technical expertise on site. So that's when they instituted the program was called the Shift Technical Advisor / Shift Engineer program, and that's when I became a shift engineer for a while, because they said you got to have somebody with an engineering degree and also operating experience or a license with the NRC. So all of a sudden I found myself on shift again, which was fine with me. I didn't mind working shift, but I wasn't an operator anymore, so that meant I really couldn't operate any of the equipment. So, you know, it was kind of like, well, I'm here watching and hoping that nothing goes wrong or something. Mm-hmm. But so we did make a number of changes. You know, the thing that actually brought us to the end was there was, and I don't even think it was tied to the 3 Mile Island thing, but there was at some point, the NRC had discovered that some people really weren't working toward their design basis, and that the design basis wasn't analyzed in as much detail as it needed to be. For instance, we had our basis for design, and it was, it filled up maybe a bookshelf. Well, when you got to the later design plants, they were the design basis for the plant would fill up this room 2 times. You know, they just had volumes and volumes of things, you know, where they would analyze things like, well, how come we're using a bolt here instead of a Phillips head screw? And down to that detail. We didn't have that detail, and we felt we got in those, at the end there, we said we only had, this was, you know, 96, 97, our license only went until 2000. When it would have to be renewed, and we said even if we started that project today, we probably couldn't even get it done by the year 2000. And besides the amount of money it would take and the number of people, so we, you know, made a decision that it was time to shut it down. It was, the other factor was when the plant, like when I came to the plant, there were 60 people at the plant, and we made 75 megawatts of electricity. And when we got to that shutdown day in 1997, we had 172 people on site, or 175, whatever that number was, and we still only made 75 megawatts. So, you know, just the house loads were just tremendous, and so it was a tough decision because we were set. The plant was absolutely running better than it had ever run. You know, people say, oh, you must have been wearing out all the equipment and all that stuff. Oh, no. That plant ran better the day we shut it. Was running better the day we shut it down than the day they started it up when it was brand new. Oh, yeah. It was just, when you would start, you'd start that plant up, put it online, it would just hum along. You know, so, yeah, it was sad. We were, because we said, we can do this, you know, because we wanted to be the first ones to make the full term. You know, and we had no intention of going for relicensing just because of the economics, you know, the size of the plant. And
so there were a lot of different factors that went into the shutdown.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, the 3 Mile Island stuff had pretty much, you know, that was, 3 Mile Island was in 86. So, you know, after 10 years, you know, 86 to 96, all the changes that had to be made were made. You know, the ones that made sense for our operation.
Well, one of the astonishing things, as you know, we put on a big exhibit of Big Rock at the depot here 10 years ago in 2006. And one of the amazing things that I found when I did the research out there for the exhibit was the plant cost $27+ million to build. And then you brought in this army of men, like you said, almost 500 people came in to tear it down, and it cost over $400 million.
Yep.
The reason being that Big Rock consumers made the decision that when it went, it had to go all the way.
Yep.
And they reverted the entire land out there, except for a couple of acres, to exactly what it looked like before the plant was built. Every cubic inch that had been put out there was taken away. Yep. And that's why it cost so much money.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly right. It was, and that's why we called it, you know, when we were making the decision to go into decommissioning, of course, people go, oh God, this is terrible. You know, my plant's going away, my job's going away, and all that stuff. But we instantly focused on calling it the Big Rock Point Restoration Project, because what we were trying to do is prove to the world that, you know, you could take one of these plants full cycle and take it back to what it was before you were ever there. And so, you know, that's what we did.
I know the day of the that we had the big ceremony out there afterwards in 2006, we took a ceremonial handful of grass seed and we walked around this path that was around. It was so hard to be on that land and visualize that sphere and that plant being there.
Yep.
You didn't think it was possible to put a plant that size on that size. So we walked around and we scattered the grass seed. It was a very, very emotional moment. Even I'm getting a little emotional right now about it, because it meant so much to the town. And
Yep.
I'd love to be able to go out there now and see what 10 years of Mother Nature has done to the plant.
Well, I was out there. I was out there not this past summer, but the summer before last, and there's just some wildflowers and grass growing, and we had put a fake rubber tree in a pot on the spot that was the center of the reactor, and it was there, but it had been blown over by the snow or something.
Are the trees coming back?
Not. Some of the trees are, but it's not. It's going to take a while for the trees to really fill in the site. But yeah, it was. The whole thing was emotional, you know. And people always said, they would say to me, "God, wasn't it terrible to tear down your power plant?" But you know, when we focused on the restoration, then it was like, well, you know what? I get to look inside of some of this stuff that we've never been inside of. You know, some of these tanks and vessels and things, and say, "God, that's the way that was. That's the way that worked," you know, and all that sort of thing. I'll tell you, the only really emotional day I had in the whole thing was the day we abandoned the control room, because I said, you know, the control room is where we lived. You know, when we ran that plant, that was it. That's where we ran the plant from. We sat in there for hours. We had our little lunches in there, you know, the guys on shift and everything, and you know, I was in there. I always tell a story. I was in there on shift the day I got a call that said my son it's time to go to the hospital. You know, and I wasn't the only one that ever happened to. And in fact, I have the clock out of the control room. And so when you look at that picture of Ed McNamara pulling that first critical on the plant, and the clock is up there in the corner, that's the clock that I have I have it in my office actually. And the day we walked out of the control room, though, we had a cake, and I was supposed to give a little talk, and man, I couldn't get 3 words out of my mouth, you know, and stuff that day we walked out of there.
Yeah, it meant a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
There were so many people in town who were so proud of the fact that Big Rock was here, because it was recognized all over the world.
Yep.
And then there were those who couldn't wait for it to be gone.
Yep.
Yeah, just like a schism here in town.
Yeah, they were a minority, though. I hope they were a minority.
But a noisy minority.
As usual.
So do you have any summing up that you want to say about?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I've got a million stories I could tell about what went on and the things we did. But, you know, overall, you know, I mean, I'm as proud as I can be that I was able to somehow work my way in there and be a part of that operation and make that electricity for the town and for the state, and then, you know, and then to finally go back and do the restoration. You know, I mean, it was really cool. Probably the only real regret is that we haven't, you know, we wanted to get the land into the hands of the state to become a state park, and that hasn't happened yet, you know. But thankfully, the consumers is smart enough to not turn it into more condo developments or any of that kind of stuff.
That was the intent.
You know, so
to keep it natural.
To keep it natural. So I'm proud of the fact that we kept it natural, and that's the way it is. Now, the other thing I'll add, and this is for future generations, that when you drive by the entrance to the plant, the new entrance to the plant, and you look across the highway and you see that big pile of dirt up there, that That is not the fuel storage. That's just a pile of dirt. But if I've heard it from one person, I've heard it from 20. Well, that's where you have the fuel stored, in that dirt pile, right? Mm-hmm. And I go, no, that's not where the fuel is stored. That's just dirt. We had stockpiled dirt to use to backfill the site because we dug out. The requirements to decommission the plant are you have to go down, I think it's 3 feet or 6 feet into the ground and make sure that the stuff, that everything is clean, okay? But we said, nope, we're gonna go down, we're gonna take all the foundations out, we're going all the way down. We went 40 feet down into the ground to take out absolutely everything. And so we needed clean fill, so we stockpiled all that dirt on the other side of the highway, and then we used what we needed, and then we left the pile there. But I'm telling you, like I said, if not once, 20 times, that's where the fuel is stored. No, it's just a pile of dirt, and there's deer on there and grass growing there, and that's just a dirt pile.
Well, I have one story myself that I'm very fond of recollecting this, because when the plant first opened, it was rather a laissez-faire operation. You could practically walk, the public could practically walk up to the sphere, because that's where the visitor center was right next to it. You could throw a stone from the visitor center and hit the
gates weren't locked or anything.
Well, my dad, Bob Miles, was the local photographer, and he did a lot of work out there for consumers. So I was up visiting once from Ann Arbor, and he said, how would you like to go into the nuclear plant? He said, I mean really into it, into the sphere. I said, well, how is that possible? He said, well, you're going to be my photographer's assistant. You're going to carry the tripod. So he called out there and got permission for me to come. And so all we had to do was tell somebody who we were. We didn't even have to show ID. And we went into the sphere, through the lock, onto the top of the reactor casing. So he's talking to the fellows about what they want, how to set the cameras up and the lights and all that. So here am I, a civilian, wandering around on the top of this nuclear reactor. And all they said was, the cooling pool was over here. Don't fall in.
Yeah, don't fall in the pool.
Don't fall in the pool. So I walked over there, and I have a hard hat on. I don't know if I had any other clothes on, but I looked over the edge of that pool and saw the most unearthly blue I have ever seen in my life.
Yep.
It was mesmerizing. Mm-hmm. I have never seen a color that intense anywhere than that.
Yep. Yeah, the shrink off. Yeah. It's pretty neat. And actually, this was actually, we had to upgrade our security in about '78. So before that time, it was exactly the way it was. The gates weren't locked or anything, and there's a story. It didn't happen to me, but the AO says he's out on a Sunday afternoon. He's out in the plant making his rounds, and he's in the turbine building, and all of a sudden he comes upon this family of 4 that are walking in the building, looking around. He goes like, well, what are you doing in here? Well, we walked in. So.
And now the bells and whistles would go off and the law would be on them.
Well, we had, we got to the point with the scanners, and there was metal detectors and explosive detectors, and search your lunchbox and everything as security got tighter, all good. And we actually had one of the original shift supervisors. He took a stand. He said, I've been at this plant since the plant started up. He said, I'm not letting some security guy that's been here 3 minutes search my lunchbox. And he refused to let him search, so we couldn't let him in. And so it was the end of his career. So I think they transferred him. They transferred him to some other plant or something. But
different times, different standards.
Yep. So anyway.
Well, thank you, Bill.
That's it? Wonderful. Oh, come on. I can talk for another hour.
Thank you so much.